honouring cycles in every part of our lives is so healing because it speaks to our universal connectedness, doesn't it? To nature, to all life. You know, this rhythmic, this beauty, it is in us. And I think we've really lost that. We've gone so stripy. We're seeing how our stripy ways are playing out. We're seeing how that's playing out on our planet. We've really got to start to tune into different patterns of being. And that comes with challenges because it goes against our whole pattern, our whole culture and our values. We live in a very yang energy mode. So in this doing, creation, the material, the giving shape and form, and that's amazing and we need that. But our culture is run so much on that yang energy that we don't allow the rest and the reflection time. And it's exactly how we treat the planet. We see our own creativity as people, we see it like it's this endless resource that we can just keep coming up with new ideas, keep doing, keep producing, without acknowledging that we also need that reflection and that stillness time. The land needs to lie fallow. We can't continually plunder it for our own wants and needs. So we need to look to natural systems and how nature operates so we can learn that same patterning because we've become so disconnected from it.
Hello again. It's so great to be back on air. Thank you to our newest patron, Rosalind McNally. We had a really fun and inspiring call this week for patrons, so if you want to join us on July 7th for the next one, please do make a monthly donation to support this podcast. We talk about the themes that are touching you and what you want to hear more of, and I share the behind-the-scenes stories of the interviews. The best part is you get to meet other patrons, and there have been some beautiful friendships bloom from here. I shared in my note to you all during the break that I was looking for alternatives to hosting retreats around the world and directly encouraging others to fly. I've also been thinking a lot about how these kinds of yoga, well-being, spiritual retreats are very white middle class, and it takes a lot of privilege to be able to go on them. So after ruminating this, I've come up with an idea for an online platform called Presence Collective, which will take anyone who wants to join on a journey month by month into living a life with conscious values and introducing you to various themes, practices, and innovations. We will have open calls to connect and share, as well as a monthly book club. I will try and bring the same level of intimacy I do to a retreat, but in this way where it integrates more naturally into daily life and it will be affordable. I'm really excited to be creating a space that is not about striving for perfection, manifesting our dream lives, or any of the other rubbish that the new age tells us, but instead really speaks to the cycles of growth and offers community and insights for how to hold ourselves through them, especially at this potent time in the world's story. I also love that it's open to people who live in more rural areas and might not have people around to talk to about this kind of thing. And also parents who can't get away from workshops, the elderly, introverts, basically anyone who can get online. I plan to open this later in the summer, but you can find out a bit more about it by clicking on courses on our website, and feel free to get in touch if you have any feedback on what would make it more useful for you. I wanted to do it as something separate to The Future is Beautiful, so that The Future is Beautiful remains a completely free and gifted outlet of inspiration. My guest today is my dear friend Anna Murray, who is the co-founder of conscious creative studio Patternity, artfully bridging the worlds of science, spirituality, and creativity with the unique power of pattern to inspire more curious, creative, and connected ways of living. At a time of complexity, individuality, and overwhelm, Anna is driven by the core belief and personal experience that a shared awareness and understanding of the universal language of pattern can inspire a deeper connection to our environment, each other, and ourselves. It is this feeling of connection that can help us to create more sustainable and ecological patterns of living, powering timely social and environmental change. Anna is also the co-author of 2 books, Patternity, A New Way of Seeing, and Be Great, Be Grateful, a gratitude journal to inspire for positive living. In this conversation, we talk about patterns, stripes, and spirals. We talk about slowing down, patience, listening, and acceptance. As life would have it, the interview itself turned into a living example of all of these things, as we had a freakish onslaught of technical difficulties and had to record the interview in 3 parts over 2 different days. Both of us laughed our way through this rather than reacting to a fixed idea of what needed to happen, which brings an embodied feel to what we discuss. I hope that you enjoy this conversation and it inspires you to find more spirals in your life. Welcome to The Future is Beautiful, with me, your host, Amisha Gadiali. On this show, we explore the weave between politics, spirituality, creativity, and sustainability. It's time for us to move beyond silos and into an integrated way of being. Every one of us has ideas and personal experiences to share that can lead us to a brighter future. This is the revolution. Despite the challenges we face as a global community or the pressures that we meet in our daily lives, when we stop and dare to dream, to ask ourselves the big questions, and to share what we are already doing, we create the future that we wish to wake up for. That future is beautiful.
Anna, it's an absolute delight to have you on this podcast. And I say that because we've been trying to do this for quite a long time.
It's true.
Not just in over months, but even today, as we've had some technical difficulties, which I'm only sharing because you and I have had some pretty hilarious conversations about the difference between how others perceive us or how we perceive other people and how they spend their time and the reality of life. And in particular, we had a journey where we had some really hilarious conversations about personal admin. And we have just spent quite a bit of time in this last hour or so watching YouTube videos and looking at a manual to figure out why, after one sound recorder broke, why the other sound recorder wasn't working. And it turned out to be something about the phantom mode.
The phantom mode.
But that's not what anyone listening imagines is happening, like in the run up to one of these conversations. And yeah, I just really loved it when we had that conversation, because I think that we really do perceive others to be living a sort of advanced human life that's different from our own.
There is no malfunctions, is there? There's no breakdown in technology. Big shout out to the lovely men who make and women who make these YouTube videos. We need to do a proper shout out to them, send them some love letters of appreciation for making these videos that we can watch on YouTube.
Yeah, that help us to find our way through life.
The material world.
How much of your life do you feel like you spend doing personal admin?
Well, I tend to make, I do to-do lists in two, I tend to do my to-do lists in 2 columns. I have my kind of work life, and then I have paternity, and then I have Anna. And invariably the Anna list, I mean, both tend to get a bit silly, but the Anna list is personal admin galore. So I'd say it must, I mean, and it feels like it must be at least even Stevens. It's a lot. The gas reader breaking down, that was you last time, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And the complexities of how to navigate some of these very mundane day-to-day things.
The being on hold for hours or talking to people in companies that are given scripts and not really able to help you very efficiently.
And the rising feeling of stress and agitation in your body. And the feeling I often get is that there must be something wrong with me. So I came back from a trip to Peru with 2 court summons, which I have to say was not actually my fault. I ended up going through speaking with the council tax, and they But the first guy had said it was, I'd made every mistake. And then I eventually, this is a very short version of the 3-hour long phone conversation. But yeah, these things, that's the real work, isn't it? To hold your peace when you're being told you have a court summons and you actually haven't done anything wrong. And you've got these pieces of paper and codes and spreadsheets and, the joys of life.
And it's the reality of also running a business is a lot of these more mundane tasks and conversations and things that need organizing and admin that needs setting up.
Yeah, and I think I've come to learn and appreciate actually the importance of knowing which mode I'm in when I'm having to do those things. So kind of call in a bit of, we talk of yin and yang energy, but calling in that yang when you need to. Actually, sometimes when you really, once we needed, we're moving our studio, Patternity studio, and we had to hire a van, and we had a problem with our credit card. And normally I probably would have gone, no, I'll not sort it out. And that day I just went, I really need to sort this out. I'm not going to be rude, but I'm going to not take no for an answer. And something arose in me, this kind of, this fierce, strong power that I hadn't really recognized before. And I just got the job sorted. The person said, oh yeah, I'll put you through. And I said, you must put me through to your supervisor. Hearing myself say things that I'd kind of heard other people say. And you realize that when you really, when something is really important and really needs to get done, you call in this new energy. So I kind of had that like yang, but it was coming from this place of like, it just needs to get sorted. I mean, this is in the admin world. But yeah, we moved. It was lovely and flowing, and I felt really good.
You've been running Patternity now with Grace for 10 years.
Yes.
And I feel like we met in the very early days, and I asked you to be part of what is the Future is Beautiful book, which was called Think Out Vote at the time, and it was the start of this project. What have you learned about being an entrepreneur, about running a business for that many years, and also constantly growing in yourself and how that sort of affects your creativity and what it is that you're doing?
Yeah, my gosh. I mean, so many learnings. And I hear 10 years. There's been so many ebbs and flows. And I guess probably one of the main things I've learned is about better balance and is about living more in balance. And I talked then about calling in the yang energy. I realized probably about 2 years ago now, and I speak for Grace with some of this because we've had deep conversations about it, but we've been running on yang, we've been running on doing, much as our message was one of interconnectedness and beauty and this, the wonder of pattern all around and the importance of connecting to nature and honoring creativity. Actually, I wasn't honoring that in myself, and we were growing the business. We'd taken on more staff, we'd taken on loans, we wanted to, expand. And this was actually when I met up with you last and we were going to do the podcast. It all almost kind of unraveled because we weren't living by those same principles. I wasn't honoring the balance of the yin and the yang. I was totally on a yang all the time and doing, and, I would be having meetings back to back to back to back to back all day long, at my computer all day long. And then in the evening I'd do a talk. I look back at International Day of Happiness 2 years ago, and it was literally, it was solstice as well. It was just all meetings. The whole day was meetings. The evening was running an event. And then I think I even had something after that or something like that. And then I was wondering, why was it I was crashing, and why was it I was feeling, actually, I was kind of feeling like I was burning out and didn't have any creative juice left and was kind of not feeling very sustained and nourished creatively anymore. And I realized this kind of mindset of growth, when it's just a kind of blinkers on, wanting to grow, much as if your message is is of a true and authentic and one around interconnectedness, sustainability, still you need to then live that in your own life. So I think the biggest lesson I've learned is to bring in a lot more yin energy into my life. And that has meant an active slowing down. It meant making our staff redundant, and it meant almost going right back to basics, which was so painful. Making staff redundant for me was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, and kind of look people in the face and say, we can't continually be paying you because we're not sustaining ourselves. And to actively, slow down and bring in more time for rest and bring in more spaciousness and bring in much more gratitude and working with our cycles and just slowing things a bit down, and actually that honouring of that and knowing when I'm in my masculine mode and I have to go and do a talk, but also giving myself time to rest afterwards. That's probably been, if I could say there was one main message, it would be about bringing in that balance in the way that I'm in that pattern and honouring nature in that way, not just talking about honouring nature, but truly living it. And that's something I'm still on. I mean, my gosh, I'm still quite a yangy lady.
I can really relate to what you're saying, because I feel like so many years my lifestyle, it's like, well, there's this many hours in a day, so you just fill them all with things, but then you're filling them with like meetings, and there's no time for like reflection in between or to kind of just regather and tune in to like what's important for the next conversation. And this week I've been in London and I've had clients coming, and I've always left an hour before and after, and quite a lot of them have been late, which in London is like a real faux pas because you miss your window.
Now we've only got half an hour.
We've got, and then there's and everyone's like messaged me with this panic. The bus, this accident happened, I'm running late. And then just to be able to go, it's okay, don't even worry about it, see you when you get here, and we've got time. And just realizing that it's even just a flexible point within myself, because I could say, but I was going to do this at that time. But then I'm like, okay, I've got 20 minutes now. I'll just do that now. And when they come, I'll just, I won't be angry with them for being late, and invite in that spaciousness. But it also means saying, okay, I'm going to make less money because I'm not going to fill the whole day with money-making activities. Or for you, I'm going to choose my clients and really work with the clients that I really want to work with, not feeling like I have to take on work, right? To pay for a huge team. Yeah, exactly. We were finding we were getting really compromised, and actually just on this new business, again, like consume, do to make more, to what end? Actually, it was ending up becoming really draining, and not allowing creativity to come and lead me, but being in this, stripe, I call it stripey, like in stripey mode. And it's funny because we used a lot of our designs at the beginning, we did a whole festival about stripes. And it's, to me, it's become the kind of metaphor. I'm writing a story about Mr. Stripe. He goes on a spin and he discovers spirals, and it's a work in progress. But we're so stripey, our spreadsheets are stripey. We're trying to make money and we send stripey emails, everything's stripey. And my life had gotten so stripey, blinkers on, and just on this new business mission all the time, and not making myself available to be led by my own creativity, to be receiving of inspiration, to then share it with others. It was just this kind of, it wasn't a reciprocal relationship. But it does require some quite like repatterning of our whole being, because we're in a mindset where more is better, right? Doing more is better. And we define ourselves by being busy, and that's good. I used to say to my dad, things busy, good. It's seen as a good thing to be busy, but actually redefining what kind of growth means to us, I suppose, in a world where growth is about more is better. Actually, a growth being about sinking down deeper and connecting to source more often. And that might be about, taking a very slow morning before a day at work, or walking in Hampstead Heath as a way of getting inspiration rather than going on Pinterest and trying to find and letting things sink in, and listening, making yourself available, for more creative
inspiration. And I think it helps to deepen. And I feel that I've been really working with that and honouring cycles more for the last 2 years, 3 years maybe. Yeah, it's almost been the unravelling and the undoing, but also a whole new cycle, a whole new spiral of what paternity is and who I am and Grace and my relationship, and finding so much beauty in that, having kind of had it all. You know, we were going to do the podcast, weren't we, when I was kind of amidst, like, it was in like breakdown mode. It was like kind of almost breaking down, but like in nature, everything has to have, there's cycles. So there is a breakdown often, and actually having a bit of stillness then before you start again. Any creative cycle, it's a book, it's a project, even a conversation. We have our kind of energy of expansion, and then we have our energy of contraction, but often we're just constantly in expansion mode, aren't we? More meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting, and that's the pattern of the way we live.
And there's a sense that the parts of a cycle where maybe it is breakdown or death or slowness or stillness, that these are all bad because we're not being productive. Or you can relate it on like the business side, or even just on the sort of the happiness side, but I'm not happy, so there's something wrong. And it's quite a brave action, really, and a brave way of being, to fully allow ourselves to live in our cyclical nature, and to fully allow that, even when we are on a spiritual path, for example, that it's not like, and now I meditate, like everything's awesome all the time, and like I'm manifesting everything that I need and everything's great, but it's like I still have sadness and anger and joy, and I'm still alive, I'm still feeling, maybe I'm even feeling more, and honouring those parts of the cycle, because I've just been through a huge death, a huge kind of a space where I've had to let go of a lot in myself, and in the outer form a relationship, but on the inner form there were so many things, and in that process you can feel like you're failing to the outside world, whatever the outside world is, I don't know, because we're all in nature, right? We are nature, but there's a sense of failure, even when I don't believe in that failure, like I don't believe in that sense of failure, but there is still like, I better not speak to anyone for a while until I've like gone through this. I mean, maybe that's also maybe that's natural, to just hibernate, to take yourself down into that space and be with it. But I find that that's where so much of the richness of life comes from, and the creativity and the knowing of ourselves and the clear ways forward.
And it's so beautiful, isn't it, to be able to hold, it's holding the tension almost of when you're moving through chaos, like allowing yourself to be messy, allowing things to fall apart. It's the hardest work, I think, to be in that place. But for me, it's this, and it's that connecting again back to the seasons, because we need autumn. That would be the messy part with all the leaves and the mulch and the nutrients are going back down, isn't it? And so it's allowing, it's kind of reminding ourselves that often the dark, the darkest points are then followed by new spring buds that have taken in all that amazing nutrients and all that sadness and all that pain and all that doubt, and it's gone into stillness, into the winter, into the dark, and then we see new shoots, and that they are nourished by that information. And I actually do something now at the end of each day, which is almost like a daily compost, just allowing myself before I then go to sleep to kind of allow whatever has come in that day to kind of move through me, and with absolute love and gratitude, kind of giving it back to the earth, and then just kind of feeling this wave of, okay, that was the end of a new day, and that I'm composting the day, And that is the beauty of what then kind of goes back in, and then a new day comes. And just honouring cycles in every part of our lives, I think is so healing, because it speaks to our universal connectedness, doesn't it, to nature, to all life. This rhythmic, this beauty, it is in us. And I think we've really lost that. We've gone so stripy. We're in a stripy world. And I'm on a mission to, shift some of those patterns.
I can't wait for the book about Mr. Stripe. It's going to be so wonderful. And it's such a playful yet poignant way of illustrating where we are.
Yeah, he goes, I know that it starts off with the Stripe, Mr. Stripe, or Stripe. Actually, don't call him Mr. Stripe was tired. Stripe was really, 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 really tired. And I identify with that. I think I've gotten to points when it just seems it's just so tiring living the way we do and working the way we do. And of course, we're starting to see, I've been talking about it for some time, but we're really starting to see it now. And it's beautiful and exciting and scary and terrifying and grief-stricken, but we're seeing how our stripy ways are playing out. We're seeing how that's playing out on our planet. So we've really got to start to tune into different patterns of being, and that comes with challenges, because it goes against our whole pattern, our whole culture, and our values, and the way, or the values that we currently are living amongst. It's challenging those, and that's, it's a kind of new mulching, and we're kind of living through that breakdown, right? The mulchiness, but there is such beauty in that as well. Same as death, like you say. It's I lost my father 4 years ago now, and that whole process was so painful and so dark and so messy and mulchy and sad. But the light that was in that time as well was just radiant, and we can hold both at the same time. And I think that's a future that I would like to be part of, that honours both of those. And that's about honouring that cycle again.
Absolutely. It's like knowing that they're both always present, and then there's nothing to be scared of or to try and move from one to the other, because if you recognise that they're both always there.
Yeah, so healing. Even just saying it makes me feel really peaceful in my body. And it's like that's what leads me now too. When you asked me that first question of what I've learned, I used to get, now and again I still do, particularly around personal admin, it comes back in. I get like a pain, like a physical pain in my like chest, in my heart. And I talk to Grace about it. It's like my acetate, we call it acetate chest, because it's almost like a scrunched up piece of acetate that goes like when I have to go really heady. And I'll get it in certain conversations. We're doing an installation at the moment, and the client recently just said, because we've got lots of nature, we've got lots of plants in it, we want to create this garden, and they said, we want to have the installation, but no, take out all the plants. And I had that call just before coming here, and but again, it's going, that I could go into that like rigid place with that, but actually let's have a conversation, let's open it up. We don't know what might happen with that yet. And it's really kind of, letting a lot of the rigidity, the stripiness go, even in moments like that, because you could kind of build up that wall, right? And in your body, like you said with the meetings, it's like you could, if you hadn't left any time after that meeting, then you would be spending the bit of time before that person arrived, sending messages, trying to rearrange everything around, finding a quicker bit of transport, spending more money, being more carbon. That's one of the things I've really learned. Slowing down the business has meant I was always eating out every lunch because I was in a rush. I was getting coffees out because I was in a rush. Get taxis places because I was in a rush to get from A to B. And you start to build in that slowness. You expend so much less. And if everyone it's really powerful to slow down.
We really don't need as much on a huge scale if we slow down.
yeah, we need so much less, and we find contentment so much more easily, you know. And I just make my own coffee, and I sit in the park, and I just think, the beauty of spaciousness, where my day would start so early and I'd be in meetings back to back all day. It's a different life. And I couldn't imagine that I could be in this position actually a little while ago. I thought it was impossible. I thought, oh no, I'm always going to be this busy.
Right.
But my ego, you know, there was a lot of ego stuff with that, with kind of letting the business go slower again, you know, because actually you think that kind of having a bigger team, a big studio is the best way to be. But actually we're doing much more creative work, working on much more amazing, like much more authentic and exciting collaborations. And you just think, wow, well, actually they're slowing down. You've got to trust it though, right? That's why I like spirals as well. Obsessed by spirals. But to me it's like trust. Don't know what's around the corner. Can't see it. It's a bend. So you're just going to have to just breathe and just be led and trust it's taking you in the right upward spiral. People get quite scared of spiral sales. Often people will be like, but it makes them think of a downward spiral.
And then we wonder what up and down means anyway.
Exactly.
If down just means we're going into the earth.
Precisely.
It's not so bad.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I'm thinking about the story being more of a like a collective story, so getting lots of people to input, because to me that's a spiral. It's kind of a swirling and a bringing in and a sharing. I think a stripy story would just be, yeah, we'll see. Don't know what it's going to emerge into.
It's interesting when you are talking about the stripy. I mean, I'm wearing some stripes today, but they feel very free, these stripes, because they're only on part of this dress.
Yeah, and I still love stripes.
But I also get the image of, you know, we've seen stripes in often prison uniforms, a stripy, the boy in the striped pajamas. Yeah. And, you know, that is a very moving film where the stripes kind of determine the destiny.
Getting tingles.
And so there is something even just out there in some of the norms in our global culture where stripes are used in a kind of controlling way, where if you're in the stripes, you're not free to be with nature. You're not free to be who you are.
Yeah. You know, city workers, or it's the pinstripe suit. It's very symbolic, I think, of a control, you know, prison bar. But then you know, equally stripes can signal the way, and it's almost like they can help give structure. You know, it can be helpful, some of this structure also. So, and they're so beautiful in nature. You know, when you see stripes, they're, you know, in agate crystals, for example, or Saturn's rings. You know, they just tell of time and growth in almost patience in some ways. There's something quite beautiful about stripes, particularly ones found in nature. We designed a climbing wall, and we had these lovely gradient patterns. We had a quote that said, adopt the pace of nature, her secret is patience. I think it was a Ralph Waldo Emerson one. And that's just so lovely. It's, you know, it's just this reminder that we can look to nature's patterns as this way of connecting to the threads of time, and remembering again that we're part of that, and with the same patterns in our own body are the same patterns that you find in nature and the earth. You know, if we're zooming out, looking at the earth from above, an aerial view, these same fractal patterns of rivers are the same patterns as of our blood, you know, of our veins, or the fractals of a tree, and the fractals in our lungs. And the trees are the lungs of the earth, and they give us oxygen, and we give them CO2. I run a lot of creative workshops where I get people to just draw, so simple, just draw a houseplant and see this interconnectedness and honor this interconnectedness. And really, it's all about that. And Patternity is all about that. It's a kind of philosophy on interconnectedness. And pattern is just such a beautiful way it's so visual, but to show that when I do slides, sometimes people kind of say, oh, do you get nervous doing talks? And I definitely do. I was talking to you earlier, I'm doing one soon, and I'm nervous about it. It is scary doing public speaking. It is scary, particularly at a very sciencey festival that I'm doing it at. But when I see the visuals of nature, and I show them in comparison, you've seen. So, for example, a spiraling fossil under the microscope and a galaxy. And I actually show one in the middle, I show the crown of a baby's head and spiraling hair. And it instantly just, again, letting my body lead me, it speaks of this language of interconnectedness that speaks to my heart. Anyone can see that, any language, any age, and it can say something to people that almost as a totem for our times. We are so interconnected with this, and we can come back to these natural systems and learn so much from them, and just bringing in that beauty and the wonder of that connectedness and orientating ourselves towards that feeling. I love to kind of rekindle that, and it helps me. Again, these things need to be nourishing, right? So for me, when I look at those visuals, it relaxes me when I kind of think, I should be telling these facts or figures when I'm doing a talk. I could just show the slideshow probably and just be quiet. Maybe I'll do that.
It'd be interesting, because I think, sometimes we think people need facts and figures, but actually we've got loads of those. Maybe the thing that we don't have so much is just being shown things and being allowed to feel.
Mm-hmm. And actually, I showed that recently, because often I do just kind of end with that image, and people find they can get quite emotional. They can actually see that and see the baby and the galaxy and this ancient fossil. Or there's also one where I have a seed actually that's just coming out, and it's just spiraling, just kind of under the microscope, the seed. And it speaks to people this symbol of interconnectivity. And I think the woman who I went into an advertising agency, so I used to work in advertising, and I feel like the whole creative industries is kind of having, needs and is having and will have more of a shake-up of a kind of actually what is our creativity, and how do we use that to create a more regenerative civilization. All these creative people, working for big brands, selling more, helping to sell more stuff. And that was my journey. I was in advertising, and I suddenly started not being able to sleep, and I was getting like sweats at night, and just thinking, I just had this in my head, this same question, like, this is not what creativity is about. This is not what creativity is about. And yes, you could have Coca-Cola from the fridge as you wished, and it was, fun, and people would go out, and lots of super smart people, really creative people. But I felt just like, it was like I couldn't describe it at that point. This was like over 15 years ago. But I just felt cut off from source, and I could almost see this stuff that I was doing was just compounding a problem, a much bigger problem. But I felt like I still wanted to work with creativity, and I still believed in it, but it just didn't feel wrong. So now I'm kind of going into a lot of these companies and trying not to annoy the person who's got me in to do a talk, but also kind of rekindle this kind of remembrance of this interconnectedness and the separation that a lot of this way of working has. It's a bit uncomfortable sometimes.
Oh. Yeah, but then if you think how uncomfortable it would have been if you hadn't listened to that call, because I feel like a lot of us get that call in different ways. The questions, the whether it comes in insomnia or anxiety or depression, that often something is speaking to us, saying like, maybe there's another way. And so many of us are scared to answer that call. And, I think some people would be listening to this conversation saying, well, it's all right for you to be like thinking about nature and patterns and talking about having less meetings or seeing less clients. Yeah. And I think what is not always realized is that it is a choice, and you do make some sacrifices, and maybe it's really uncomfortable for quite some time, but what you have now is something that you've created.
Yeah, I do. I hear that so much. It is absolutely terrifying. It's terrifying to follow that call. But I think if you don't, it gets louder and louder and more uncomfortable, and it will show up in ways that you might not realize are connected. It can feel really overwhelming to get that call, actually, to get to feel like something's not right. And it's really scary. But I think that voice that gets louder and louder in different ways. It will show up in aspects of our lives of this low. It might be a low level discomfort. It might be an anxiety. For example, for me, it wasn't like a okay, right, I'm going to leave working in this and I'm going to start. I knew when I met Grace instantly there was a real connection with us, with our, not only the aesthetic of what we were interested in, looking at patterns and seeing patterns in everything. We really wanted to celebrate that, but also there was this kind of heart connection, this wanting to, there was something more, which I don't think we really even understood then, and maybe only just on the kind of edge of learning more deeply about what that connection is now, to do with purpose. But I think, it wasn't just a case of, right, old life over, new life beginning. Again, it's this space between, it's honouring that kind of holding both. I actually still continued working how I was working, but I reduced the days. And then it was almost just a kind of switch over. It sounds simple, it wasn't actually. You find you're working 5 days in 4 days. There was a conscious decision to kind of move and change, and it didn't make any sense. And a lot of people were like, but you had a good job and you're flying around the world, but it was about really looking at what I spent money on as well, and actually really examining my life and making more conscious decisions. And it has meant some sacrifices. Like, we've never been, with Patternity, it's never been about like bigger, better, massive projects. We had a phase when we were trying to make, pay staff. Yeah, I think kind of that examining, but there's the payoff for me anyway. There's no question, there's just no question that there was no possibility of continuing down that path when that voice was getting so loud. And for me, it was showing up, like I said, in not being able to sleep, anxiety. I think probably a bit of depression. Actually, I felt really, really just some days just couldn't get out of bed. I felt so confused, just overwhelmed. There was something just like, it was like this kind of crazy. I think there's a lot. Like, it was like an energy actually that wanted to go somewhere. And I think that's a lot of people who want to channel their creativity towards something that is of service actually, but just don't know how to do that. And I think that actually when those stripes open more, or when we can clear those kind of blockages and those fractals again, when those rivers get stuck, our creativity can't flow. And when it can flow and we can feel part of something, and we feel like what we're doing is authentic to us and helping in some way to kind of help the world, create a more sustainable future. I think that's just, there's no snazzy jacket or snazzy holiday can change that. And actually, I think a lot of people, the way we work, will go on a snazzy holiday and be sick on that snazzy holiday, because again, they're not bringing in enough rest and reflection in their day-to-day lives. So there's people just burning out left, right and centre, because it's just not possible to keep doing and going, creating the way that we are. And you see that on people's personal lives and on a planetary scale. We're literally burning out. And so how can we come back to that more natural rhythm? But it is totally challenging our modus operandi. And that's, it's scary and it's overwhelming.
And having been on that journey, can you share maybe a couple of paternity projects that you're really proud of, that, having made that decision and having created Patternity and having got to use your creativity in ways that you knew somewhere was possible, some of the things that you've created?
That's a lovely question. There's one, I mean, it's a project. Our gratitude journal was one of my favourite projects, and it's a book. All our projects are so different, but it's a book sitting over there. We were actually approached by it's published by Penguin. They'd come to one of our events. They'd actually come to one of our marbling events, which is all about flow and surrendering to the process of just creating something in the moment. So people haven't done marbling, just kind of putting ink on the surface of water, and then you put paper down and you lift it up and you have this beautiful kind of swirling, flowing technicolor pattern, and it's so joyful. And people really get into this beautiful state of flow in these workshops. So the publisher had come to that, had come to that workshop. She'd seen that Patternity was kind of a visual thing, and then also a way of living, a philosophy on life. And so they came to us to write this gratitude journal. And I actually, it was a lovely bit of serendipity, because it was around that time, I mentioned my dad passing away. I'd actually been doing a lot of work with gratitude with my mum during that time, and every day we'd actually text to each other. Some days we'd miss it, it wasn't very rigid. And we'd just say something that three things that we were grateful for that day. And it was, amidst the horrors, again, as I said, of caring for someone when they're very ill. It was about bringing yourself back to notice and appreciate the small things and the things that really make up the fabric of our lives. The someone making you a cup of tea, the beautiful new flower that's just come out in the garden, or an amazing cloud, amazing, not even necessarily an amazing sunset, but just a sunset, and I think just, it was that for me and with my mum was just such a beautiful tonic to that time of struggle. And it was almost like this balm that just kind of rubbed us, healing balm, and focusing on the positives amidst a time of negative. And a lot of the time people can kind of say, it's almost like it's a privilege to kind of think of things you're grateful for. But even in the worst times, you have to kind of sometimes force yourself. There's so much science, it's beautiful behind it, of actually getting into a pattern of gratitude can really help us, because actually as humans we are quite set up to focus on the negative. System malfunction. But we do, and it's very easy to go down that downward spiral of letting the negatives kind of draw us down. And actually that practice, so the journal is it's a way to kind of help people bring more gratitude in. So you fill it in every day. It's very simple, but it also has a lot of exercises in it as well that I designed to help people bring gratitude in other ways. So it might be connecting to the elements or connecting to their body, going on I like this one, it's quite playful, just going on a little adventure yourself and seeing where a different pattern might lead you. So follow a circle or follow a stripe and see where it leads you, and kind of take you out of your autopilot patterns. And a lot of those exercises I also run as events too. And then in regards to other types of projects, so maybe more design projects, we've done a really big installation in Trafalgar Square that was a giant kaleidoscope. And the brief was to kind of create a pattern or create something, an installation that would be a celebration of home. So there was quite a few different designers. A lot of people made quite interior, home interior projects. But our response was actually to cover the outside of this space in a pattern it's our signature pattern, and it's made up of very fundamental shapes. We call them the fundamental building blocks of life. And that's kind of our trademark pattern. And it's made up of big circles, squares, triangles, rectangles. And it's a celebration of the interconnectedness of the pattern. It's almost like this universal language that for us is a representation of home in the biggest sense, like our home, our planet, that we all share. We all share this home, this same home. Let's fall in love with that and remember that. And so we've made this pattern, and we've made this box. And then it was a giant kaleidoscope, so everyone could come and they could peer inside and turn the wheel. And then we had a motion sensor, so people would take lots of kaleidoscopic pictures of people back through the kaleidoscope, and then that made a huge online gallery of loads and loads of people. Actually, most of them were kind of peering into the kaleidoscope with a kind of like frown, kind of trying to work out how it actually worked. But that was really beautiful, and it was just this celebration, again, a celebration of interconnectedness and pattern as a way, as a lens to visualize that, or at least draw people in, because actually I can talk about the pattern, but a lot of people, wouldn't necessarily know that was the thinking behind it. But that's something about pattern that is so interesting, in that I think people do recognize there's symbols and there's shapes that we inherently are drawn to. The circle, it's the symbol of unity, it's the shape of our own planet, this kind of universal symbol for connection and oneness. And so much of life kind of revolves around these fundamental shapes. I recently ran a tour of Marrakesh. I mean, so many incredible patterns. And I was telling people about a lot of what these sacred geometries and shapes mean, and how they relate to nature, and how they relate to harmony and music. And it was so lovely to have that, I could just tell people, and it was there all around me, to kind of show these same shapes and symbols are actually ubiquitous across so many world religions. And you start to get into some pretty beautiful, if not heavy stuff, when you start to talk about that. But these same shapes, they speak of a language of connection. And again, we've lost that. There's these same shapes and symbols, these same patterns and textures that are part of the web of life, and we are part of that web of life, and we've somehow forgot it along the way, but we can come back to it. And it speaks of harmony and beauty again. So that was one of my other favorites, was this tour of Marrakesh recently. It was so fun, and a lot of that was around connecting with the craftspeople. A lot of what we do is collaborate with craftspeople as well. So actually going and learning from makers, weavers, printers. We did a collaboration with a company called Tribal Textiles in Zambia, and we went and learnt their techniques, and how their techniques are shaped by their environment, and shaped by the land, and shaped by the textures and the materials that they have. And again, we have really lost connection with how things are made. I know that's massive passion of yours, but yeah, this disconnect of the way we make things, the way things are made, and who makes them, and the hands that have woven them. So that project we called that Crackle Connections, because the technique that they use is a starch batik, which is dried in the sun. And we're working a lot more with those kinds of projects. We often question product, because does the world really need any more things? But for us, we feel like when the products can be really well made, but also something that people can wear in celebration of craft and connection, and actually comes and feeds back to those communities, and is a way for them to continue to tell their stories. And so many of these patterns that people use are so sacred. We've actually hardly even touched Indigenous patterns until very recently. I think until Grace and I were ready in our own lives to actually go into that depth and go into that honouring. Like never were we going to even touch sacred patterns and start moving them around, or slapping them on cushions and things. It's actually about really honouring the depth and the beauty of these people, and what the messages these patterns have to tell us. They have some very strong messages to tell us right now. I've been in Peru learning about Icaros from the Shipibo. I mean, mind-boggling, and mind-bogglingly beautiful, rightly so, because it's a language of the heart. And so learning about what these patterns mean, and how they speak of rhythm and connection and nature, it's just incredible. And that's almost like a whole new part of Patternity that's evolving, is working with craftspeople around the world. We've kind of done a few projects like that, but we'd love to set up ways to almost create nodes, but ones that are regenerative. And that needs a whole new system of almost doing business rather than just taking from them and making product. I see a lot of that happening.
Yeah, that's the old way.
Exactly. Finding ways to build that. And equally, again, adopt the pace of nature. Her secret is patience, kind of acknowledging that kind of process isn't a quick. It takes time to build the relationships, and there's nothing can account for time and relationship, because that takes years of trust and and respect and honouring. So we're in no rush actually, and that's actually taken a huge pressure off. It's lovely.
Yeah, it's the slow, deep.
Yeah. Love the slow, deep.
Hello, this is Amisha. We are just taking a little break from the conversation here. On behalf of myself and the team, I want to say thank you for being part of creating a beautiful future. We make this for you so that we will all have the vision, wisdom, and activism we need at this time to weave a new narrative. Can you help us with this? You can do that by making a monthly donation to the podcast to cover our costs. Just the equivalent of a fair trade banana you might eat or a chai latte you might drink whilst you listen to this will make a huge difference to us. Head to www.thefutureisbeautiful.co/community to become a monthly patron. And the other thing is to tell your friends about this podcast so they can tune in too. Send them a message or post on social media and let them know what you love about it. And whilst you're at it, leave us a review. And now, back to the conversation. Thank you for your loving beauty.
You touched on the relationship between like planetary burnout and the burnout that a lot of us are kind of feeling or constantly on the edge of or always falling a little bit over. Can you share a little bit more about how those things are interlinked in your way of seeing?
Totally. Yeah. So it's something I'm so interested in and have looked to natural cycles for inspiration when exploring that, because I went through a period of just, even though, I love paternity and we're just working all day, every day. And I think it's such a passion of mine to explore this connection between the two, because we live in a very yang energy mode. So in this doing, creation, the material, the giving shape and form, and that's amazing, and we need that. But our culture is run so much on that yang energy that we don't allow the rest and the reflection time. And it's exactly how we treat the planet. We see our own creativity as people, we see it like it's this endless resource that we can just keep coming up with new ideas, keep doing, keep producing, without acknowledging that we also need that reflection and that stillness time. And it's like the land needs to lie fallow. We can't continually plunder it for our own wants and needs. So we need to look to natural systems and how nature operates so we can learn that same patterning, because we've become so disconnected from it and we somehow feel like, oh no, because we can keep doing and doing and doing. And we all do it. I mean, I still do it. And I wonder then why I fall flat. I felt so low yesterday. And I was almost thinking, how can I even go and, speak to Amisha about these things when I'm not living it myself? And I constantly come up with that.
But you are living it. That's
yes.
the thing.
Oh, yes.
Because if you weren't living it, then you just feel great all the time and you'd be in, you wouldn't be in a real cycle.
Yeah.
And so that's the interesting part of it, right? That there's this disconnect between the idea of it. Okay, great to be more in tune with ourselves, with nature, with our natural cycles. But then still this idea that when we're in the ground bits of the lower part of the cycle, that we're doing something wrong.
Exactly. Yeah. And that it's not, that it's not beneficial to spend a day just resting after you've done a big event, that there's the mind just goes, no, must get doing X, Y, Z. And there's always X, Y, Z to do. And that's the thing, it's an infinite list. So it's almost that holding the tension again, almost like what we had to do earlier with the podcast, because it was like, you just have to hold that discomfort and actually, oh, there's loads of emails probably piling up in my inbox. Oh, I should be contacting that person and saying, thank you so much for being a part of the day. But actually just giving that little bit of space. And it's almost like I do a bit of yin yoga now, and I love how they talk about how it's about building the connective tissue rather than the muscle, isn't it? Like, a lot of other yoga is like strength building, whereas it's about building those kind of connective, the connective tissue and making that strong, and that being just as valuable as the muscles. And I feel like that's what that kind of holding of the tension does. And I've really learned that. I've really learned that through my training at the Red School, which is, I think, maybe something I touched on earlier. And actually my mentor, Alexandra Pope, was in the audience at my talk at Hay. And oh my God, seeing her there, it was so amazing. She's such an elder of the work, and her work is teaching women to live more in tune with their cycles, their monthly cycle, and bringing an awareness of menstruation into, I mean, it's becoming much more public now. There's some brilliant new books out, and it's something that I trained on her women's leadership training last year in Stroud, and just learning about the similarity between the monthly cycle of a woman and all cycles, and how everything is about a creative cycle. And we often don't think of things in that way. And so we've lost the sacredness of cyclicalness, and just remembering that everything that we do links back to this energy of expansion and then contraction, everything. And it's helped me just learning, I mean, I could go on for hours probably about the intricacies of the cycle, but most of the work is really to track your cycle and to know what comes up for you, what are your unique patterns, where does stuff come up? Is it in the first week, which is your spring, the kind of spring energy? The second week is summer energy. They give this, the cosmology relates, they call it the inner seasons. The third week is autumnal energy. That's when you're going back into your feminine energy. And then down into winter, which is your deep yin, your deep stillness. And winter would be your actual menstruation. And the invitation is to really, firstly, track your cycle. So so day one of your cycle is the first day of your menstruation. And really understand the patterning, the days, every day, kind of writing how you're feeling on which day. And the second one would be to really try and rest in the second arc of your cycle, because the first arc, your beginning, is masculine energy. It's the energy of yang. It's getting stuff done. Often I'm like, oh, okay, great, I can get loads of stuff then. It's often when I try and book to do talks, or I try and do, might be new business meetings, because I'm feeling a bit more outward. But whereas in the past, I would constantly be on the outward, there was no sense of any rhythm in my life. It was just like more. How much can I pack in? And then now actually giving myself space in my calendar in the second half of my whole cycle, and then completely, if I can, and it's not always practical, but giving myself 2 full days of rest when I actually start my bleed. And actually, because that is the earth calling to slow down. I used to get really bad anxiety, used to get really overwhelmed, like, just being out in the world. But ultimately, it's that time of drawing in, and it's about listening, deep listening to what the earth is trying to say. And I think a lot of women totally bypassing, as I was, they're bypassing their cycle. And they're not taking time to listen to their own voice, their own creativity, their own creative life force, because they're out doing all the time. Even if it is really purposeful work, I think you can go deeper and deeper into your life mission by really starting to slow down and live in tune with your cycle. And it's magical. But again, you've got to constantly it's like this heart or womb and mind battle, because part of you's like, what am I getting done here, just like resting at home? And I try and switch my phone off. I try and switch off my digital devices. I try not to make to-do lists. I mean, I'm like a to-do listaholic probably, and it's like, it's just about being with that inner voice and not letting the noise of all the outside world come in and want things of you. And it's my way of carving out time that's just for me. And what comes up through that is often just so beautiful and so tender and so subtle. that I wouldn't be listening to it if I was taking painkillers and running out, having loads of meetings everywhere. Yeah, I'm so grateful for that work. I love learning how, women of communities would often gather and they would be together, not because they were shunned. A lot of people think that was, off you go. But actually they would go and they would gather and they would be together, and they were seen as messengers for the earth because they were listening, and they would receive the information from Mother Nature and then go back to their communities and share like messengers. And I think, well, what louder message if a lot of women are having terrible pains, PMT, just, the awful anxiety or sadness. A lot of people, such awful, Grace, my business partner, she used to get so angry. She used to get such anger. And both of us, mine was sadness, mine was sadness and overwhelm. Hers was anger and frustration. And talk about a business partnership where that's going on constantly, these cycles. I mean, it was crazy. And now it's like this whole new world is emerging by both of us. We both trained at the Red School together, which is a really amazing experience. And how that's helped us to deepen into our kind of purpose and our creative missions in life. And that's still only just kind of unfolding now. But I really credit the Red School training and that learning from my cycle with that.
And how much less space for unnecessary conflict there is, because you understand individually, you understand your cycles and patterns,
mm-hmm.
and then together as business partners, you understand each other's, and so you're just able to build into the workflow space for what everyone needs. And I think that's something that we don't have mostly if we're kind of living by the book as it is.
Yeah.
So when I did I haven't done the Red School training, but I did a priestess training. And so we did a lot of work on the cycles. And I've been trying to plan my life on my cycles, but then sometimes I forget, either when it's booking things really far in advance or booking things like realizing that, I've got only a week left here and I've got to do this. And, it's always a little bit of a nightmare when I get it wrong.
Well, this is it. And also a lot of people don't have a regular cycle. So that's a big part of it. A lot of people don't have a cycle anymore. A lot of men say to me, but what about me?
Yeah.
There is so much more learning that we can do and share together. And a lot of people use the moon. The moon, obviously, they can work with that energy of expansion and contraction.
What's your take on men's cycles, and what's the Red School's take on men's cycles?
I definitely think men have cycles. I have no question about that. But obviously it's harder to track because I think men can maybe work with the moon cycles. I actually don't know the answer to that, really. It's a tricky one.
One of my teachers, the teacher that I did my priestess training with, she said that they align with the women close to them.
Yeah.
So as well as obviously the moon, they also, if they have a wife or a partner or a sister or a mother, or they live with female friends, then it matches, tune in the same way that women are tuned in to other women that they're around.
That's what Jamie said, that he was sure that happened, that him and I would both be feeling a little bit wobbly kind of around the same time.
So as in your housemate?
My housemate. Yeah. And one of the lovely things also was that Grace and I actually started to go opposite one another. And that was really lovely, because it often is that so one can be in the supportive role.
That's really helpful as well for a business, because then there's
really
one
amazing
person that's feeling more up for the big meetings or the pitches or whatever it is.
I mean, one of the things that I was always, where I would struggle most was my kind of pre-menstruum. So in my autumn, kind of around like day 24 onwards, would be, I just feel like my skin was on fire, felt so sensitive, just felt so permeable to life. So I can remember at the Red School once someone saying, if you really start to honour your cycle, you'll find that changes. And I honestly couldn't understand. I couldn't believe that would be. And now when I when I slow down, consciously slow down and give myself more space in that phase of my cycle, I really love it now. I feel really feminine. I have this like discernment about me, and I feel like I talk in quite a different way. I feel quite, there's something that's almost like a sinking down into in that phase. And it's almost like I'm going home, because when I also reach my menstruation, there's like this feeling of just like coming home to myself, and there's this stillness, and that I can actually embrace that, rather than I likened it more to a kind of wrestling of myself off a cliff edge before. It was like this, because often I would just wedge all my stuff right. Even when I was working with my cycle, I'd try and squidge all my meetings, all my work, and so I could then take a day off. I mean, even a day is quite luxurious. I'm aware that a lot of people don't have lives where that's possible. It's really quite hard. One of the lessons is you can just take a morning if you can't, or an hour.
But even if you can't take the actual time out, just to know
exactly, yeah,
that that's how you're going to be feeling, and not planning things after work, or going for a little walk or something, or just being kind to yourself for being tired. Because I feel like so much of the trauma and the stress and the overwhelm and the intensity of that period for women is the having to pretend it's not happening, which we've all done for years, because that's definitely how it was at school. Mm-hmm. It's not like you can just say, look, my brain's not absorbing information in the same way today. Mm-hmm. Can I go and sit and be quiet?
Yeah, amazing, and then,
in a few days I can catch up.
It does actually break my heart a little bit thinking about teenage girls still at that time, for all that to be going on hormonally, and then to not have an understanding of the fact that you're not the same all the time, and the expectation of yourself to constantly be in this outward facing mode, this very together mode. There is a time in our month where things start to fall apart, and it gets a bit confusing, and that was when I used to get so sad, because it would all feel, what's going on? My mind wasn't working as well, and I like to be articulate, and and suddenly I'd find that I wasn't, or I was making mistakes, or wasn't wanting to go out and meet people. And actually that's because naturally my body was saying, no, this is time for you to start to listen to yourself and be going inward. If we're in this cycle more widely as a culture of a kind of autumnal breaking down, again, it brings to mind the importance of slowing down in this phase, and the importance of making more space, and the importance of having more time for presence and stillness, because we're living through the breakdown. And often in that time, you can often feel like you kind of want to speed up more than you want to give more space. And I was finding that in my cycle, I'd actually want to squeeze in all this, there's so much to do before the stillness, but actually maybe we're living in this transition time, but it's how we balance it, because there is work to be done. So it's a really fine balance of the doing and the being.
Yeah, because a couple of things come up for me when you share that, and one is like, it's not just teenage girls, because I work with some women's business networks and do work on well-being, and I always like to talk about the menstrual cycle, and literally it's almost like talking to a room of men in suits.
Yeah,
like the embarrassment, and the like, oh no, can't talk about that at work. And it's like, come on, like, it's 2019, you're a woman, most of them are entrepreneurs in this particular business club, and it's like, why don't you use your power, like work your business around your cycle, take the pressure off, like being superwoman all the time. And actually it's about connecting to your wisdom.
That's it.
That's what happens in those still days. That I've said to some male colleagues of mine once, like, on those days, like, what comes out of my mouth is the closest to truth that I have. So it might seem sharp, but listen up. But if you can sit and be with that quietly and write it down, but that's also where you can develop just a better relationship with yourself, which also connects to then worth and kind of inner presence. And then that connects to how we behave in the world, how much carbon we use, how much we want to buy things, how much we want to be addicted to things, we want to consume. And so it's all really connected. And the other bit that came up for me as you're talking about the seasons is even the way that we do autumn into winter culturally, because that's the busiest work time normally, like that's September, October, November. It always feels really, really busy. Like there's so many things to do before Christmas. And then there's all of the parties and so it becomes this crazy, crazy busy time.
It's actually counter to a natural cycle. And we're living and experiencing the trauma that living against our natural cycles is having. We're so disconnected. And exactly, most women, I would say, are disconnected in that way. And it actually can be the most transformative and practical. What I love about it is how insanely practical it is and actually quite simple. But it can only come from you, because only you can start to see and notice the patterns. And so there might be specific days where actually they're blip days for you. And often, that we can start to isolate them. And also how it relates to our creative process as well. So for me, I was much more someone comfortable in the spring, summer energy, spring energy, like lots of new ideas and, quite heady, and I liked like new business kind of leads, and actually found it much harder in this almost like slowing down phase where it's kind of all changing now. My whole creative process is changing. I'm finding I'm giving myself more space after things to integrate it, whereas I'd always be on to the next thing. So it starts to change everything. And I just think the more we acknowledge that cycle, the more we start to acknowledge other cycles. And I honestly feel like that has the power to change so much in such a positive way. But we've got to do the work. And sometimes it feels counter to everything that we've come to believe is growth orientated and positive and of value in the world. We've not been taught to value rest. We want to be in perpetual summer.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just, it's that hunger for experience, or even giving. I led this pilgrimage in India earlier this year, and there was a lot of learning that came from it because my cycle moved. And so we wanted to give the people coming on it as much experience as possible, which they all loved, but it was too much for us to like tour guide and be like the yoga and the meditation teacher and like get everyone in rickshaws and keep it inexpensive and like let's go to that thing at 5 a.m. because it will be so beautiful, but then no one's having enough sleep. And as the holders of that experience, I mean, I got to the end of it and I don't think I've ever been so tired. And it was a real reminder, because it doesn't just happen in the corporate. It's not like this is a thing where you go, oh yeah, I'm close to burnout, now I'm going to leave my corporate job and then start my own thing, and then it's going to all be different, because we have to keep being vigilant and probably keep pushing it, because we're so wired to push it, if we're wired to push it. For me that was a real lesson of less is more. And then I needed to take a lot more time out afterwards, which I hadn't factored in because I packed too much into the actual thing.
It's so interesting, because even similarly with this day that we did on Sunday, it feels scary to have too many gaps, doesn't it? Even with a 1 day long event, actually we probably had too much content still. Because actually what a lot of people need, is to meet like-minded people who are interested in the same themes and learn, some hard facts. But equally enough space to kind of integrate that and be not just feeding people more and more and more, but it's the way that we're hardwired for like more input, needs more input. And actually, we need time for such, at this time in history, we need to give ourselves time to really feel into this paradigm and this paradigm shift. And it is uncomfortable, and it is grief inducing, and it's hard, but actually we have no choice really but to fit into it. My Fritjof Capra, who introduced me to Jeremy, become a really good friend, and he told me this beautiful story about how plants deal with trauma, and was kind of looking to nature as a guide. Well, actually, what was quite interesting is I'd been out in Silicon Valley, kind of talking to quite a lot of tech people, and hearing stories. And I think the founder of Amazon, Jeff Bezos, recently has done a talk about people blasting off. We're going to start building new kind of spaceships, and we're going to have new orbits, and we're going to all inhabit different planets, and fine, we can just kind of go off and leave planet Earth and do the same elsewhere. But where animals experience trauma, because we have legs, we can move away from trauma. We try and just get away from it. So, from the example of just a human getting away from something uncomfortable. Similarly, we're trying to get literally off the planet and jet off. Whereas plants, they can't do that. They don't have legs, so they can't run away. When they experience something traumatic or something of discomfort, they actually dig down deep. So they dig down their roots deeper into the soil. And I've got this beautiful picture that I show in presentations of this incredible tiny little plant on the surface, and then beneath there's just incredible network of roots that you can see as a side on. So they dig down, they kind of go deeper down into the soil for nourishment. They connect with other plants, and they feel into the trauma, because they don't have organs as we do, but they feel into it, they sense into it with their whole sensing body, and they really feel what's going on deep and down into the trauma, rather than trying to get away from it. And I said to him, so is the message that we can learn a lot more from plants? And it's exactly that. And it's this that interconnectedness, and that the beingness of what we're experiencing and the presencing. Without that, we're just scuttling away and trying to avoid it. And I think we're living in that time where it calls for us to really feel into all things that go wrong. Podcast machine breaking several times, really annoying for us, wasn't it? But I felt like we held that kind of tension, before doing a talk, being really, really nervous, but just like trying to feeling into it, and learning all these awful facts about the world and what's happening, but feeling it, because we need to feel it, and then we can make change from that place. Yeah.
Thank you, Anna. It's been really wonderful to talk to you. Can you, and it just feels like that's a natural place to end.
Where do we go? Yeah.
Can you share some links of where everyone can find out more about you?
Mm-hmm. Well, the best way, because we are so visual, our best channels is Instagram, to find out what's kind of happening in paternity world. And so we're just Patternity, and that's with 2 T's, Patternity. Some people call it Patternity, which I like both. And then our website is patternity.org. And our first book is called Patternity, A New Way of Seeing. And that is, you can buy that in many bookstores and also on Amazon. And also we have a book called, that I mentioned earlier, which is called Be Great, Be Grateful. And that's a gratitude journal. That's also available on Amazon and in many bookshops. And then we have, on our website, we have lots of information on events and things like that.
And we'll share links to everything that you've just mentioned and everything we've mentioned during the conversation.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so lovely. I've enjoyed our 2-parter and everything in between.
Got to hang out more.
Yeah, it's true. Oh, thank you, Amisha.
Thank you.
Thank you for spending your precious time with us. As always, you can find links to everything we mentioned in this episode, download our book, and discover so much more over on the blog. We don't believe in selling you things you don't need through this podcast, and so it's made possible with you, our community. If you loved this and would like to fund our show with a monthly donation or join our online group to connect with other listeners, please visit www.thefutureisbeautiful.co and click on Community and Support. Please also share with friends, hit subscribe, and leave us a review so we can grow. Those gold stars really help others find us, so these ideas can spread. Here is to us, creating a beautiful future together. The Future is Beautiful is made by an all-female team working voluntarily or on reduced rates until our listener support grows. If you have been moved by anything you heard here, please donate the equivalent of buying us a drink. All donations make a huge difference to us and will allow us to keep doing this and remain advertising free. Until next time, I leave you with this question. How will you create beauty in the world?